Let's start at the beginning, and I mean at the very beginning. The origin of the universe. Remember how I said every worldview answers the core questions of reality and the human condition. This would be right at the core of a worldview, namely, where did the world itself come from? How did the material universe get here? In a debate on BBC Radio in 1948, Frederick Copleston, the Christian philosopher, was debating Bertrand Russell, and he asked him the question, well, how did the universe get here? To which Russell replied, I should say that the universe is just there, and that's all. Just there, a brute fact of nature. Well, 75 years later, we know that this is not an adequate explanation for the origin of the universe. The universe is not just there, but had a beginning about 13.7 billion years ago, a beginning of space, time, matter, and energy. And in fact, you could really describe the historical sciences of the 20th century as really a revulsion against the Big Bang theory. That is to say that scientist after scientist from a naturalistic persuasion repeatedly called the Big Bang things like this: repugnant, preposterous, philosophically unacceptable, that it would betray the very foundations of science, that it was a crackpot theory. That's from Fred Hoyle. He actually gave the name Big Bang to the Big Bang theory. It's kind of funny. He called it crackpot theory, then called it the Big Bang. Anyways, strange conclusion. And then Jeffrey Burbidge says that his fellow naturalistic scientists are running off with, quote, evangelical fervor, end quote, to the, quote, first Church of Christ of the Big Bang. Yes, this was threatening. To believe that the universe was just there and then to discover that the universe had a space, time, matter, and energy beginning. And since then, even though that this was barricaded, this was pushed against, for the last 100 years, the evidence has come in from multiple different directions. In fact, what we've seen is that the Big Bang, the standard Friedmann-Lemaitre model, the standard cosmological theory, has been proven and proven and proven over and over and over. What are we to make of this? Well, this is so demonstrable in cosmology and physics that Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose of Oxford University write this: almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Alexander Vilenkin, who is an agnostic cosmologist out of Tufts University, as an aside, I'm not going to quote to you tonight from any Christians, and I'm not going to quote to you tonight from any believers in God. Every citation I'm going to give you is either an agnostic or an atheist. So I'm kind of climbing into the ring here with both arms tied behind my back, but I'm just trying to give you the science or the atheistic view on the subject. So Vilenkin, who's colleagues with Arvin Board and Alan Guth, he said this in 2006. It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even unreasonable men. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. Then more recently, in 2012, all the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning. And again, regarding other cosmological theories, none of these scenarios can actually be past eternal. And again, in 2015, we have no viable models of an eternal universe. The Board-Guth-Vilenkin theorem gives reason to believe that such models simply cannot be constructed. The evidence is in, and it's overwhelmingly in favor that the universe had a beginning. Enter Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mlodinow's book, The Grand Design, in 2010, in which they seek to explain how the universe could spring into being from nothing. They open up the book in page 5. They write, philosophy is dead. Now, right off the bat, they're not off to a good start. Philosophy has not kept up with modern developments in science, particularly in physics. Scientists have become bearers of the torch of discovery in our quest for knowledge. So the scientists have replaced the philosophers. Philosophy is dead. What's interesting is, in their central thesis on page 180 to describe the origin of the universe from nothing, they make no less than 3 philosophical blunders. So philosophy isn't dead, it's just being ignored, apparently. Here's what they write. Because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Now let's start with that first clause. Because there is a law of gravity. Is, in the English language, is the word of being, and it's in the present tense, because there currently is a law of gravity. Gravity cannot exist apart from nature. Think about that for a second. Physical laws exist within nature, within the physical universe, but they do not exist apart from nature. That's like saying we have grammar without words and sentences. It's like saying we have rules to monopoly without monopoly. The rules make no sense. These can't exist apart from nature. What about the second sentence, or second clause? The universe can and will create itself. Folks, this is metaphysically absurd. An effect cannot be its own cause. An effect cannot be its own cause. It makes perfect sense to say that X will and can create Y. It makes no sense to say that X can and will create X. For in order to create X has to already exist, but that's the thing that X is creating. And so this is metaphysically absurd that the universe, as one philosopher put it, can pull itself up by its cosmic bootstraps. And then finally, the universe was created out of nothing. Now this is where it gets really deep philosophically. Do you know what the word nothing means? It's a noun. It means no thing, not anything, non-existence, non-being, universal negation. Nothing is what Justin Bieber writes songs about. That's what nothing is. Nothing means no thing. They have redefined the word nothing to describe something. Could you imagine if Christians were this loose with the definitions in their scientific literature? Could you even imagine that? To say that nothing is actually something? They refer back to chapter 6 in their book where they say that nothing is actually a quantum fluctuation, a quantum field. But a quantum field is not nothing. Do you know what a quantum vacuum is? It is a broiling, burbling sea of energy. It is very unstable, where subatomic particles jump out of the quantum vacuum and then recede within a trillionth of a second. And a quantum field or vacuum cannot exist forever. So let's just grant that the universe came from a quantum vacuum and that space-time started and collapsed back into a quantum vacuum. This itself would need a beginning, which they admit. This is guilty of a philosophical conundrum or a philosophical mistake called equivocation. That's where you're using one word in two different senses. Like if I said, you don't know what time is, define time for me. And you said, well, I know what time is, it's a magazine. That really hit it off in philosophy class. Apparently, one person kind of applauded. Nothing means nothing. And even if this is true, it would still demand a beginning. So this leaves us with the contention that nothing created something. That is an extraordinary claim. Absolutely extraordinary. That claim is more extraordinary than any miracle I have ever read in the Bible. Any of them. Because at least in the Bible, when you have a miracle claim, whether it's a virgin birth or people going through a parted sea, at least you have an infinite personal God who can do miracles. Here, you have no one who can do miracles. Now, as extravagant as this is not the claim that's being made. The claim is not that nothing created something. The claim is that nothing created everything that we see. Far more implausible. And if you could believe that nothing can create something, I've heard some people say, oh, that's really deep. It's not deep. It's a contradiction. It's metaphysically absurd. If you could believe that, then you can believe anything.